Michel de Montaigne was a 16th century French philosopher who defined ambition not as virtue, but as an unnatural disease of the soul, because it makes people sacrifice the life they have right now for a future that might never even happen. In 1571, right on his 38th birthday, he walked into his office and permanently resigned from his position as a judge in the Bordeaux Parliament. It was exactly the kind of role Renaissance men spend their whole lives networking, scheming and stressing out to get. Over the years, he looked at the older politicians, judges and aristocrats around him. They'd spent decades chasing promotions, royal favours and public honours. While he didn't use the modern term rat race, his description of them matches it perfectly. He saw that by constantly playing the role of important figures, they'd forgotten how to just live normal lives. As soon as they achieved one goal, the satisfaction wore off and they immediately started worrying about the next one. Realising that he was on the same track, he quit, moved back to his family's estate in the French countryside and set himself up in a stone tower on the property. He built a massive library there and had 54 quotes from ancient philosophers carved into the wooden beams of the ceiling. From that point on, he spent his time studying the only subject he actually wanted to understand: himself. He observed his own habits, flaws, and everyday routines, and wrote down his thoughts about them. And he called these writings Essais, which comes from the French word meaning to try or to attempt. Obviously, most of us don't have an inherited estate we can retreat to, and for most people, walking away from work tomorrow isn't a realistic option. But Montaigne's lesson was never really about quitting your job. It was about changing your relationship with ambition, status, and success. The good news is that you can start doing that wherever you are, and in this video we're going to look at the practical ideas Montaigne left behind and how they can help you step back from the rat race and enjoy life a little more. Number 1. Build your Arrière-Boutique. Leaving his job didn't stop the world from demanding his time. Family, society and daily obligations still pulled at him. Montaigne realised that he needed to draw a hard line. So he set a strict rule for that study he built. No family, no servants and no work were allowed inside. He called it his Arrière-Boutique, the room behind the shop. It was a space where the outside world was simply not allowed to ask him for anything. Montaigne used a practical example to explain this. Think of a local shopkeeper. All day they stand at the front of the counter, they deal with demanding customers, manage inventory and stress over money. If that shopkeeper stays at the counter long enough, they start to believe that the shop is their entire life. They forget who they were before the doors opened. To stay sane, they need a private room in the back. Today, we rarely close our shops. We tie our worth to our productivity and to what we do for other people. We grab our phones and check notifications before we even get out of bed. We live our entire lives at the front counter, handing our energy over to everyone else. We have nowhere to retreat because we never built a back room. We don't need a stone tower to escape our lives. Montaigne stated that the Arrière-Boutique is psychological. True Arrière-Boutique is a boundary you draw quietly, in your own mind. This means carving out a space that belongs to absolutely no one else. It's an hour spent on a hobby you have no intention of monetizing. It's sitting with a notebook in the morning before looking at a screen. It's taking a walk without headphones. It's just a pocket of time where you drop the roles of employee, manager, parent or partner. You step away from the front counter, close the door, and remember who you are when no one's asking you to be useful. Number 2. Stop guarding your money. We're conditioned to believe that true financial security is always one more investment away. We spend our lives working jobs we tolerate just to watch a number grow on a screen. Montaigne fell into this exact same trap. For the first part of his life, he relied completely on his family for income. But when his father died, he suddenly inherited the massive family estate, along with the literal physical reserves of gold and silver. Instead of feeling free, he became completely paranoid. His immediate instinct was to lock the wealth down. He hid his coins, obsessed over their safety, and admitted that his thoughts were entirely consumed by his fortune. He was obviously richer than ever, but psychologically he was a prisoner. He'd become a guard dog to his own vault. To break this habit, Montaigne stopped counting his money altogether. He wrote that hoarding wealth caused him more anxiety than being broke ever did. He realised that money is completely useless unless it actually buys you time and peace of mind. He then adopted a comfortable lifestyle, accepted that minor financial losses or theft are just a natural tax on living, and he stopped tracking every single coin completely. So if you want to step out of the rat race, you have to stop looking at your savings purely as a high score to be increased and start looking at them as your tool to buy freedom. Define exactly what enough looks like for you. Once your basic needs and a reasonable safety net are covered, refuse to let financial paranoia dictate your choices. The wealthiest person is the one who has enough to live, owns their own time, and has the psychological sovereignty to step away from the calculator and actually enjoy life. Number 3. Lower the stakes of your own importance. While other 16th century thinkers were writing heavy books about how mankind was the centre of the universe, Michel de Montaigne was sitting on his floor playing with his cat. He watched the animal and famously wrote, "When I play with my cat, who knows if I'm not a pastime to her more than she is to me?" To the cat, the stone estate, the money, his political career, none of that mattered. To the cat, he was just another breathing creature in the room. A large, mildly entertaining animal. Montaigne realised that humans manufacture their own misery by taking themselves too seriously. We treat our daily problems like matters of universal importance. He realised the easiest way to snap out of this delusion was to look at how regular people actually lived. So he spent time watching the peasants in his village who lived and worked without ever agonising over their legacy. He reminded himself that underneath the expensive clothes and polite manners were all just biology. As he famously noted, even on the highest throne in the world, a king is just sitting on his own bottom. So the next time you're laying awake at 2 a.m. sweating over a passive-aggressive email from a client or a missed deadline, practice what modern psychologists call the 1-year test. Ask yourself a simple question. Will this matter a year from now? Will it matter 5 years from now? 99% of the things that drain our daily peace of mind won't even be remembered by next month, let alone next year. Realizing that your crisis is temporary instantly dials down the panic. Another deeply practical habit is to find an environment that naturally makes you feel small. Go sit by the ocean, take a walk through a forest, or just look up at the night sky for 10 minutes. I know it sounds basic, but when you look at something unbelievably massive that has existed for millions of years, it acts as a psychological reset button. When you finally accept that you're not the centre of the universe, you give yourself permission to just exist in a room, breathing quietly, no more or less important than the cat sitting next to you. Number 4. Embrace intellectual humility. In the 1500s, Europe was torn apart by religious and political arguments. Scholars and nobles constantly postured, desperate to prove that they were right and defend their public image. Montaigne just found it exhausting. He had a custom coin minted, engraved it with a pair of balanced scales and the phrase, "Que sais-je?" which means, "What do I know?" Whenever an argument flared up, he used that coin as a reminder. He didn't need to defend his ego or even win the debate. He had no problem changing his mind, and he happily admitted when he was completely clueless. Today, the corporate rat race demands that self-same exhausting certainty. At work, you're expected to have an instant take on everything. You have to sound like a visionary. Admitting you don't know the answer is treated as a weakness. We spend all day faking expertise just to look competent in front of our co-workers. But saying, "I don't know," is actually a massive relief and even a strength. When someone uses a corporate acronym in a meeting that you don't recognize, stop nodding along. Just ask what it means. I guarantee you, half the rest of the room also doesn't know and is too afraid to ask. When someone asks you for your instant take on a new project, don't invent a smart-sounding answer just to save face. Look at them and say, I haven't looked at the data enough yet to have an opinion on that, but let me get back to you. The moment you say it, the pressure drops. You stop carrying the weight of some fake professional ego. You realise that you don't need to have all the answers to survive the day. You just have to be willing to step out of the performance. Number 5. Travel without a destination. Montaigne took a massive 17-month road trip across Europe. If he was on his way to a major city, but heard a rumour along the road about a weird local custom, a beautiful ancient ruin, or an interesting natural hot spring, he'd instantly order the carriage to change direction. His friends would constantly complain, stressing out that they were losing time, wasting money, and going wildly off track. But Montaigne would just smile and tell them that he wasn't actually going anywhere in particular. He wrote, I have no project but to travel, and I travel only to move. To him, the detour wasn't a distraction, the detour was the journey. Instead of forcing a rigid schedule, he chose to simply go with the flow, letting the road dictate his day. The rat race trains us to do the exact opposite. We make every single action a stepping stone to something else. If we read, it has to be for career growth. If we exercise, we have to track the metrics. Even vacations turn into stressful checklists, rushing from one landmark to another just to take a photo and prove we were there. The problem is that when every moment has to be productive, life starts to feel like one long list of tasks. Stepping out of that mindset means going with the flow and doing things that have zero measurable output. So next time you travel, walk out of the hotel with no map and follow whatever looks interesting. Instead of treating the city like a to-do list, you can bring that same approach home. Go for a walk without your phone or smartwatch so you aren't tracking your steps or your heart rate. Pick up a piece of fiction and read it just for the story, without trying to extract some life lesson to level yourself up. When you learn to love the detour and go with the flow, you realize you don't need to constantly be moving forward to live a meaningful life. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can do is just wander. Number 6. Practice radical presence. Montaigne wrote a beautifully simple line that encapsulates his entire approach to life. When I dance, I dance. When I sleep, I sleep. If he was walking through his orchard and his mind started drifting towards a stressful political debate or a business issue, he'd catch himself. He'd gently pull his attention back to the physical reality around him, the texture of the path, the shade of the trees, and the simple rhythm of his footsteps. Later in life, Montaigne suffered from excruciatingly painful kidney stones, but instead of letting the chronic pain ruin his life or wishing he was anywhere else but there, he used it as an opportunity to practice radical presence, learning to coexist with it rather than fighting reality. He realized that even in moments of discomfort, there was still a strange beauty in simply being alive and experiencing the full spectrum of human consciousness. The lesson Montaigne left behind is to stop waiting for the perfect conditions to start enjoying your life. Your life is happening right now, in the middle of the ordinary daily grind. Whether it's washing the dishes, sitting in a chaotic morning commute, or brewing your morning coffee, don't try to mentally escape. Turn off the podcast, put away your phone, and bring your full attention to exactly what you're doing. Focus on the temperature of the water, the sights out of the window, or the smell of the coffee. True luxury isn't an expensive vacation or a premium lifestyle. It's the capacity to be fully present for the life you already have. Number 7. Seek soul-deep connection. The defining relationship of Montaigne's life was his bond with his fellow writer and civil servant, Etienne de Boissy. When they met, they didn't trade favours or leverage status. They instantly connected on a deep intellectual level. They dropped their public titles and shared their unfiltered thoughts, fears and ideas with zero hidden motives. Tragically, Le Boissy died from a sudden, fatal illness. And the loss devastated Montaigne so deeply that he essentially started writing his famous essays just to fill the quiet void his friend left behind. Years later, when people asked Montaigne to explain why their connection was so unshakably strong, he didn't give a list of logical reasons. He simply wrote, "Because it was he. Because it was I." Montaigne was deeply influenced by the ancient Greek philosopher Epicurus, who taught that of all the things wisdom provides to make life happy, genuine friendship is the greatest. He understood that true friendship creates an unshakable safety net for your sanity. When you sit down with a friend or a colleague outside of work hours, consciously avoid talking about the project, the boss, or the market. Instead, ask real human questions. Talk about what's actually keeping you up at night. Share your weirdest hobbies or the things that bring you genuine joy. The idea is to stop networking and start connecting. When you have a small circle of people who truly know and accept you for who you aren't just surviving the race, you've already won it. Number 8. Confront your mortality. One afternoon, Montaigne was out horseback riding when one of his servants, riding a massive workhorse, lost control and crashed into him at full speed. Thrown to the dirt, he lay unconscious, vomiting blood. His family genuinely thought he was dead. But as he slowly drifted back to consciousness over the next few days, he experienced a realization that completely changed his life. Dying wasn't actually scary or painful. He described it as a gentle, peaceful fading away, like slipping into a deep sleep. Before the accident, Montaigne had been deeply anxious about death. He heavily practiced memento mori, the ancient Latin practice meaning remember that you will die. He read Stoic philosophers like Seneca and Epictetus, spending years regularly thinking about his own death, believing that rehearsing for it in advance would somehow make him less afraid. But surviving the crash shattered that anxiety. Montaigne realized that the Stoics had it backward. You don't need to spend your life intensely preparing to die, because nature handles the dying part for you. The only thing you actually need to figure out is how to live. He famously wrote that when his time finally came. He didn't want to be caught stressing over his legacy or clutching his wealth. Instead, he wrote, "I want death to find me planting my cabbages, careless of death, and still more of my unfinished garden." He meant that you should be so engaged in the simple, ordinary acts of living, your hobbies, your family, your everyday routines, that death is just a minor interruption, not some grand finale you have to study for. And this points directly to the core of the rat race. The entire trap relies on one massive lie, the assumption that you'll have the time to actually live later. We sacrifice our 20s, 30s and 40s on an exhausting treadmill of stress, networking and chasing promotions. We assume we'll finally get to enjoy our lives once we hit a certain bank balance or retirement age. Montaigne's brush with death exposed the flaw in that maths. Later is a complete gamble. When you realize that life is short, you stop feeling the need to chase every promotion, seek approval from everyone around you, or constantly prove your worth. Instead, you start to pay more attention to the life right in front of you and the things that genuinely matter today. And that's our video. So what did you think? Will you be making any changes to your life due to Montaigne's teaching? Do you think we should be living for today? Or do you think we should really be planning for the future? But until next time, I've been Dan, you've been awesome, and if you enjoyed what you saw or found it helpful at all, why not check out our full Philosophies for Life playlist? And of course, for more videos to help you find success and happiness using beautiful philosophical wisdom, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks so much for watching.